All right. Hi, everybody. Hopefully you're doing great out there. Thanks for watching. In this video, I'm going to talk about more of Plato's Meno. So hopefully you've had a chance to read maybe the first half of the Meno. You're going to want to finish that in the next couple of days, next few days. Um, then we can turn to our next philosopher, Epicurus. Um, Doing a couple works by Plato, the Euthyphro and the Meno, and then we'll move on to another ancient Greek philosopher, another ancient Athenian philosopher. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you. So here we are. I think this is where we left off. We saw that Meno had been trying to define the central concept of virtue after he began the dialogue asking Socrates to define whether or not virtue can be teachable. Socrates is like, well, I can't really define that. I can't answer that because I don't know what the essence of virtue is. So then they set out to figure out what virtue is, and surprise, surprise, Meno struggles with that project. So um, eventually, Meno gets upset at Socrates and calls Socrates a broad torpedo fish. Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen okay here. I'll make this a little bigger for you. So this is from, oops, go down here, make this a little smaller. Okay, there we go. So we get to um, bottom of page 69 here. Meno says, after Socrates implores Meno to start over and try to define virtue again, Meno says, Socrates, even before I met you, I used to hear that you are always in a state of perplexity and that you bring others to the same state. And now I think you are bewitching and beguiling me, simply putting me under a spell, so that I am quite perplexed. Indeed, if a joke is in order, you seem in appearance and in every other way to be like the broad torpedo fish. So he's really throwing haymakers now, verbal haymakers at Socrates. For it too makes anyone who comes close and touches it feel numb. And now you seem to have had that kind of effect on me. For both my mind and my tongue are numb, and I have no answer to give you about what? About what the essence of virtue is. Yet I have made many speeches about virtue before large audiences on 1,000 occasions, very good speeches, as I thought. But now I cannot even say what virtue is. I think you are wise not to sail away from Athens to go stay elsewhere. For if you were to behave like this as a stranger in another city, you'd be driven away for practicing sorcery. Okay, so now I think the first thing to note here is the language in this passage suggests that Meno thinks that Socrates has harmed him in some way. Okay, what's the relevant way that Socrates might be harming Meno as is captured in this passage? Well, not physically, right? It's something mental, something having to do with Meno's knowledge state. So we call this a kind of epistemic harm. So the word epistemic, it relates to the ancient Greek word episteme, which means knowledge. The word epistemology is the study of the science of the logic of knowledge. And epistemic, Epistemic, that's how you spell the word, it just means of or related to knowledge. So the kind of harm here is an epistemic harm. And it seems that saying that Socrates has put him in a worse state epistemically than he was before. Okay. Um, Maybe just something to note here, a couple things to note here. Meno, he is not lacking in confidence at all, given, or at least he wasn't in his past, lacking any confidence because he was the kind of person who gave speeches, fine speeches, as he would claim about what virtue is. But Socrates is convincing him. It seems like he doesn't know what virtue is. And then there's this other bit here about that might give a clue as to the setting of the dialogue where Meno says, in response to this epistemic harm, that Socrates is wise not to sail away from Athens to go live elsewhere. Well, that's something that was planned by Socrates' friends, some of Socrates' friends, namely a man named Crito. A dialogue is named after him. It's in this 5 dialogue set. So reading before the Meno had planned to have Socrates go and live in Thessaly, where Meno is from, as it turns out. So Meno had heard of this and has um, um, and knows that Socrates doesn't want to sail away. We know that in the Crito, when Socrates is in prison, he's he's told you can sail away, go to Athens or go to Thessaly, leave Athens and go to Thessaly to be safe. It's not a problem. But Socrates says two wrongs don't make a right. So my being wrong by Athens doesn't justify me being wrong to Athens in response. And he appeals to something like the social contract, where he's agreed to the conditions of the legal and juridical system in Athens. Okay, so this dialogue seems to be taking place, you know, later in Socrates' life after he's gotten in trouble, criminal trouble in Athens. When exactly, we're not sure, but at least we get a ballpark, location of where in Socrates' life this dialogue is taking place. Again, at least a life that's portrayed by Plato. So the Socrates responds by calling Meno a rascal. You're a rascal, Meno, and you nearly deceived me, blah, blah, blah. So this, now he's just being playful and ends up flirting with him a little bit, a common thing that happens in the Socratic dialogues. And then after this bit of flirtation, Meno and Socrates implores Meno to get back to defining what virtue is. Then Meno says this: how will you look for it, Socrates, when you do not know at all what it is? How will you aim to search for something you do not know at all? If you should meet with it, how will you know that this is a thing that you did not know? So this is on page 70. This is a very famous passage in Plato's works, where Meno lays down what is still to this day called Meno's paradox. It's a paradox of inquiry in general. It's just in this text, the paradox applies um, to um, to virtue, and Socrates' search for virtue. He's inquiring into what virtue is. So, so this is just a very general paradox of inquiry. Now, a paradox, just so we're clear on that, just means something that appears to be inconsistent, something that appears to be a contradiction. Now, whether or not a paradox is an actual contradiction has to get worked out. So it's called a paradox because it seems there's something paradoxical about not knowing something. If you don't know something, then it seems like um, we're going to struggle to search for that thing. And there's something paradoxical about that, because searching seems to be the thing that gets us answers when we try to find them. So how you look for Socrates when you do not know at all what it is? How will you know at all? How will you search? How you look for virtue, Socrates, when you do not know what virtue is? And then this gets understood as a couple of different questions, a couple of maybe problems. How you aim to search for something you do not know at all. So how will you direct your inquiry, or what method will you take to find out what virtue is? And then there's like a discovery problem. How will you know you found it? How will you know that you met with it? Um, if you don't know at all what it is that you're looking for. Socrates claims not to know what virtue is. Okay, so that's the problem. Socrates responds by saying, "Look, I understand. I know this. I know this problem. Okay, I know this. I know this. I know this kind of skeptical challenge to the kind of inquiry that I'm interested in." He calls it a debater's argument. Do you realize what a debater's argument? I think there he's appealing to the idea. This is sort of kind of skeptical move to make in a debate or an argument with someone to try to cast out on their ability to find the answer to what they're searching for. Okay. That a man cannot search either for what he knows or what he does not know. He cannot search for what he knows, since he knows it. Okay, so you can't search for something you already know, nor for what he does not know, for he does not know what to look for. Okay, so it looks like this way of characterizing Meno's paradox is at least put in a different kind of way than the way Meno put it. But Meno takes no exception to that. And Meno says, well, does this argument seem sound to you? Does it look like I'm giving you like a genuine challenge, You're trying to find out what virtue is. How you look for it, how you find it. Doesn't it seem like a good argument, this paradox that I'm laying out? Socrates replies, not to me, and then he goes on to say, and Meno wants to know why. So Socrates goes on to say some interesting things as we'll turn to. So back to the presentation, just so we can capture the idea of Meno's paradox. Socrates claims to know what virtue is, claims to not know what virtue is, right? We know that, not to know what the essence of virtue is at the very least. One reason for thinking that Socrates doesn't seem to be saying there's no anything at all about virtue, because is that later in the text he provides us with clear examples of people who are virtuous. So and then he had no problem with Meno's first definition in terms of the kinds of things that count as virtuous. He just took a problem with those just being examples. So examples seem to be okay. It's just the underlying feature that's had by every example. That's Socrates' concern. So Meno's formulation is that what's the correct method for figuring out what virtue is? That's the method problem. What method are we going to take? How will we aim our search? How will Socrates aim his search? And then how will Socrates know that he's learned what virtue is? He doesn't know what the essence of virtue is, so how will we know it when he sees it? Supposing Meno were to offer a correct definition. And Socrates' formulation, which we'll set aside, we'll just focus on Meno's, because all we need really is one can't search for what one knows because one already knows it. And then two, one can't search for what one doesn't know because one doesn't know what to look for. Okay, so that's Meno's paradox. And then we're going to turn to Socrates' solution to Meno's paradox, because we know that Socrates doesn't think that the paradox works. So just real quick here, I want to make sure that we're all good. So by way of quick recap, Meno's upset at Socrates after this effort to define what virtue is. Meno's like, I've given speeches before large audiences, on 1,000 occasions, good speeches on the topic of virtue, but now I've been um, um, made mentally numb, and my tongue is even numb as a result of the kind of beguiling and bewitching that you've imposed on me, right? And Meno seems to be claiming that he's been epistemically hurt. At least that's what he claims, right? Um, Maybe this Meno claims to have been epistemically hurt by Socrates. Okay. So here, all we're doing with the epistemically, hopefully this is not problematic. It's just the way in which Meno's hurt is with respect to his knowledge, right? His knowledge, what he thought he knew, is taking a day is taking a hit. Um, so, and then I say further lashing out is by Meno is to run this paradox. I think that what Plato's doing in the text here is he's introducing a philosophical problem, a genuine philosophical problem about how it is that we come to know things. Um, we don't know what the essence of virtue is. We don't know what the essence of piety is, if we're Socrates, right? We don't know what the essence of justice is, or courage, or love, etc. Well, suppose we want to figure those things out. Well, how do we know we're using the correct method to figure these things out? Um, Maybe to make the problem seem more pressing, and maybe bring it to life a little bit, is you know you don't you don't know what the essence of virtue is. Let's think about the example from the Meno. Well, um, uh, like if you knew the correct method for finding out what virtue is, then presumably you have a sense already of what virtue is, or you know what virtue is well enough to know that the method that you're taking to arrive at answering the question, what is virtue, is going to lead you there. Okay. And if you, so that's thinking about the method problem, not thinking about the discovery problem, you know, setting aside the method problem, suppose Meno were to offer a definition that Socrates goes, oh, that's it. That's the essence of virtue. Well, would Socrates already have to know what virtue is in order to say, oh, that's virtue? You've given it to me. You've given me the correct answer. But Socrates doesn't know what the essence of virtue is. So it looks like when we sort of look deeper, um, even just a bit deeper, we can see the force of these problems, the method problem and the discovery problem, respectively. Okay, so if you know you're following the correct method, then it looks like you have a sense of what the essence of virtue is. And if you know it when you saw it, well, then presumably you already knew it. Okay. Paradoxical, right? And this applies to anything that we're trying to search for, something that anything we're trying to inquire into. Okay. We're trying to figure out what human nature is. Okay. We're trying to figure out that. And, well, what method do we take to find out what human nature is? And suppose we stumble across it in our studies, right? Wouldn't we have to know what it is in order to know that we have the correct answer? The same thing would go for, trying to figure out what the essence of water is, or what the fundamental building blocks of chemistry are, um, or to know, you know, um, what happened right after the Big Bang, or whatever it is that we're thinking about. This problem just generalizes. And Socrates, though, he takes this problem seriously. Plato takes this problem seriously, it seems, at least through Socrates. And so in the text he does this, we get to some heavy duty metaphysics and epistemology. So these terms we're going to or the term epistemology was going to come back, I knew, and then I'm introduced this other term, metaphysics, to you. So metaphysics is that part of philosophy concerned with um, with with reality, and what fundamentally exists. And epistemology, as we know, is concerned with knowledge. So Socrates is going to make some heavy duty claims about reality, in particular about the nature of reality and the nature and human nature. So presumably humans are part of reality. So when you do a theory of human nature, you're doing a metaphysical theory about the nature of human beings. So you're concerned with reality. I should say just a brief bit more. It's really it's what exists and what reality is like, or what existent things are like. So, if you're doing metaphysics, you might try to argue for something like God's existence. Well, what's the nature of God? So you want to know whether or not God exists. We also want to know the nature of God, or the essence of God, if I can put it that way, or um, the form of God, to use another way in which Plato might describe it. You argue that the soul exists. Well, what kind of thing is a soul? Is it material? Is it immaterial? You argue that we have free will. What kind of thing is free will? Okay, what's its nature? What's its essence? So when Socrates is searching for the essence of virtue, he's looking for something metaphysical, then, isn't he? Okay, he's looking for something metaphysical, some feature of reality. Okay, same thing with piety in the Euthyphro. Okay, obviously he's concerned with, like, something in ethics that we consider normative ethics, that part of ethics concerned with how we should live our lives. And when you think about piety, well, going back to the Euthyphro, we're thinking there about something related to, how we should live in relation to the gods. Okay, morally speaking, it's like a more religious concept. But then when we get to the Meno, the concept is central concept, at least the first part, is virtue itself, and that's a part of ethics, right? If you think about virtue and ethics, they seem to go hand in hand with each other. The proper place that virtue is supposed to play, the concept is supposed to play in the overall theory, is something that philosophers differ on, but it's centrally taken to be an ethical concept. Um, so when by dealing with the essence of virtue, we're concerned with ethics, but we're also concerned with metaphysics. What kind of thing is it? What's its essence? Is what Socrates is looking for, right? But of course, there's epistemology in the neighborhood as well, isn't there? Because we have to think about questions. Well, how do we know? How is that we know the essence of virtue? How do we know when we found the essence of virtue? So epistemology is definitely relevant. So, anyways, when Socrates offers his solution to Meno's paradox, he offers some heavy-duty metaphysics and epistemology um, to to solve Meno's paradox. Just give you a flavor, man. We'll talk more about this in my next video. Um, Socrates is not impressed with the paradox, and he offers a theoretical solution to it. Well, also he offers a practical solution to it, but his theoretical solution involves arguing that we're immortal beings. So somehow, like, what does it mean to be us? Um, um, what it means to be us is that we live forever. We have souls that exist forever. We've lived many past lives, or we're the kinds of things that essentially don't end exist that don't cease existing. That's the nature of a soul. Here's a knowledge claim. We have knowledge of everything from the eternal past, or from however long we've lived in the past. We have all knowledge. Okay. So given the fact that we live forever, we also have all knowledge. So this is not just a claim about, about knowledge, but it's a claim about human nature such that it has this knowledge. And I shouldn't even say really human nature. That's a little misleading, as we'll see. It's really our nature, because Socrates seems to suggest that we're not essentially human, as it turns out. We're essentially these souls, and we're currently living in human form. So there's something like a reincarnation of souls idea that can live in different kinds of bodies. Okay, so we'll talk about that more next time. So sometimes human nature gets used in this sort of broad way to mean like what we essentially are. Um, Sometimes it's used in a bit more narrow, like what does it mean to be human exactly? And I'm more interested in that, the first sense. And I'll try to keep that clear moving forward. It's really what we are fundamentally, essentially, where we're immortal souls with knowledge from everything from our eternal past. And learning is just remembering or recollecting what we know, and teaching is activating someone's recollection. Okay, so when Socrates teaches someone, who teaches Plato, for example, he's just helping them remember what they already know. Okay, so if you come back here to Meno's paradox, what's the correct method for figuring out what virtue is, or what anything is that we're searching for? Well, it's going to be the recollection method. We just need to remember the knowledge that we already have in our souls, okay, from all of eternity, yes, immortal souls. And then how will Socrates know that he's learned what it is? Well, he'll know it, because he'll just be remembering it. So that's how Socrates can say something like, yeah, there's a sense in which I know what it is, so when I see it, I'll know it. It's because I just need to remember it. And that's at least, Plato, Socrates, and the Meno. Okay, whether Socrates held these views is questionable. At the very least, Plato seems to be using Socrates as a spokesperson for developing this new method for doing philosophy. So we've talked about the Socratic method, but there's this new method that emerges here, this recollection method that gets Socrates out of Meno's paradox. But there are all these other heavy duty assumptions, again, metaphysical and epistemological assumptions. Um, so these four claims here. But I want to stop here because I think I've said a lot, and I want to keep these videos um, short, so that way you're incentivized to watch them through. So I'll go ahead and stop here, and then we'll pick up with more discussion of Socrates' solution to Meno's paradox, and then Socrates' attempt to support his solution, his theory of recollection, by using the example of a slave person. And then we'll go from there. So hopefully um, you enjoyed watching this, and hopefully if you have any questions about the material, you'll reach out to me and let me know how I can help out. So thanks for watching. Take care. And as ever, have a good one.